Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, I'm Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And it is my honor to introduce today's podcast guest, which is Erin Marcus. Hi, Erin.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here. I can't wait for our conversation.
Yes, me too. And before we introduce you formally in the right way, I want to give a big shout out to Steve Ramona, who introduced us. And I recorded a great podcast with Steve. And I was also a guest on his podcast. And I'm going to include those in the show notes so our listeners can check it out. So thank you, Steve, for the introduction. And Erin, let's introduce you. So you are the founder and the CEO of Conquer Your Business, which is an international company driven, basically it's helping driven entrepreneurs and small business owners get financial and emotional freedom they need in order to build a business.
Yes.
And I love the word driven entrepreneurs, right? Because I say for my company, we help fast-growing companies lacking consistency. And we love that energy of driven entrepreneurs, people that want to do better, people that are ambitious, that really want to get to the next level and really deserve help.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things is that you can have fun doing it.
Right.
When I think about driven and going for more and all those things, I'm looking for people who are doing it because they want to create something and they're excited about creating, not people who are doing this kind of like a feel of obligation, right? Or coming out of fear if they don't do it, all of the negative. I tell people all the time, I ask people to do a lot of things that make them nervous. If you're not driven by some unknown emotional, right? You can't do the things that scare you. If there's not, right? If there's not something there behind you, just making it all possible.
Absolutely. Well, Erin, tell me your story. Tell us your story. How did you get to where you are today?
I always laugh. I'm like kicking and screaming, right? It's so, because in hindsight, it makes sense and it doesn't make sense, because I come out of Chicago public schools in the 70s and 80s. I had far more important things to do as far as my teenage self was concerned than get an education, right? There was much more important things to be doing out there. But I always supported myself. That was what we did then, that whole concept of Gen X, raising ourselves. It's true. It really is true. That is what we did. So always had a job and went to college, got jobs, turned into a career. And the theme, oddly enough, looking back, is two things that kind of go together and may not sound like they go together. I never felt the rules applied to me. Now, I'm not talking about like stop at the red light, pay your taxes on time. I don't mean those rules, like, yes. But I mean the rules that this is what you should do, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do because of who you are or what you are or where you're from, any of that, right? I never had those blinders. At the same time, I never thought anyone was going to hand it to me. And I think that's that Gen X thing. I didn't think the rules applied to me, but I also knew whatever it was that I wanted, I was going to have to create it myself. So I
have to stop you there, because I think those are really, what you just mentioned, I think it's a key to success, because you are willing to disagree with the norm.
Oh, yeah.
You have to, as an entrepreneur, you have to. And you didn't feel entitled. So you were totally going for the hard work, for getting it yourself. So I think those two points here that you brought up, they're very important. They're very important for people to understand in order, I mean, those are key to success, in my opinion.
I absolutely agree with, I know that they have served me well. And I know this from listening and talking to other people. When I listen to people tell stories about, well, I followed this path because that's what I had to do. I just don't, and it's not a criticism. I just don't understand it, right? People's brains work differently. So there's like math and I don't understand that either. So, right, like there's people's brains just work differently. And I never felt that way. I never felt that way. But the work ethic kept opening doors. So through my jobs and through corporate, the work ethic and the absolute lack of attention span combined with a thirst for learning. Just absorbing information. And when you put all that together, I did very well in corporate, which led to promotion after promotion to the next opportunity. They paid for my last corporate job. They paid for an MBA. So once I realized I do need more formal education, there is some of that teenage rebellion there going on in high school, but they paid for my MBA. I had amazing opportunities. And what I learned was business. What I learned in that environment was the puzzle of business. And I absolutely fell in love with it. When I left there after much crying, but excited to try something out on my own, I bought a franchise. And the franchise had to do with families with aging parents because my last corporate job was in long-term care insurance. So I felt those markets went together. And I got that office out of 200 offices. I got my office to the top 10 in like 18 months. And as much as I loved my clients, that wasn't why. It was because I love the puzzle of business. Right. And so the franchisor would have me come in and train new franchises, and I would speak at their events. And then I was speaking at the networking groups I was in, and all the things you do to market your business. And when it was my turn to speak, the group was like, yeah, we know families with aging parents, but why are you making money? Why is this working for you? What do you know that we don't? And what I knew was the marketing and business strategy. What I knew above all else was marketing and business strategy. And so again, another hard decision, jump off the cliff the rest of the way, right? And so we're coming up on 5 years. And it also got to the point where I was like, working with families with aging parents, it's so hard. There are amazing people who can do that. You are in the middle of everybody's trauma. And it is so hard. And then over here, so I would be doing that. And then over here, I was helping my networking friends and helping the vendors that I worked with and helping my referral resources grow their businesses. And I realized, one, I was better at that. It was much more interesting to me. I wasn't tied geographically, and like for a million other reasons, that was really, it's really figuring out what that thing is, the tiny little thing, not the big, huge, wide thing, but what is that thing that you just do so well without, it's not hard. It's not hard. They call it your genius zone. Where is your genius zone? And how, so that's really how I got here, is I uncovered through tons of experience and tons of work and tons of effort and tons of money and tons of mistakes, massive amounts of mistakes, right? I uncovered my genius zone. And then I've built the support system around it so that it can be in service to other people.
That's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So let's expand a little bit about your genius zone. So tell us more about that.
So what I do with businesses is we create client acquisition systems. I knew you'll love that word systems in there, but it's a client acquisition system. That's one of the main things, right? I help businesses grow. And we do that by looking at the stage the business is in, what they're doing currently, where they want to be, and then going with strategies over tactics. Too many people start with a tactic The tactic's not right for what they love doing. The tactic's not right for their stage of business. They don't have any of the other pieces in place in order to let that strategy work, succeed. And it's not the strategy, it's not the tactics fault. The business just wasn't ready for it. So we look at what is the phase of business? Are you in a growth phase? Is it time to start leveraging your resources? Or are you truly ready to scale, which is a whole different animal? And then
go ahead.
And then we just match, right? Match your strengths, your goals, your current situation, your future casted situation, and where everything is. And we put the strategies in place. And a lot of it is really focused on that client acquisition system to create a predictable amount of leads coming in so that you can keep moving up.
That's amazing. So let's talk about client acquisition.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the different stages, and what are the different stages that you see? I mean, you mentioned them, but what is the difference in terms of the client acquisition and how it relates to the different stages that the business is in?
Absolutely. So I divide it this way, and I warn people, like, if you draw the line somewhere else or you use a different word, do not get stuck on semantics. Don't let that mess you up. So to me, the way that I use this framework for decisions, for me, this is actually a decision-making framework. Growth is when you just need more. You just need more. You need some more money. You need some more clients. You just need more. Growth strategies, sticking to client acquisition, right? There's business model, and then there's client acquisition. So sticking with that for growth, you just need to talk to more people. These strategies have to be simple and direct.
So give me some examples for those strategies.
Go to a networking event. Meet more human beings, create referral partnerships, talk to 10, 15 people a week. You just need more humans in your world. Now, yeah, it needs to be backed up with the right messaging and all that stuff, but growth strategy, assuming everything else is dialed in to some extent, if you just need a little more, you just need a few more people. Mm-hmm. There's nothing complicated about this. I call this remove your dots. Remove the complexity. And by the way, you could be a $50 million company and just need more.
Right.
If something happens, and my business is a perfect example, I was doing a bunch of stuff at the end of last year that was really a scaling strategy, and it wasn't working the way I wanted it to. It just wasn't coming together the way I wanted to work. I stopped and I went back to a growth strategy. I removed 75% of my efforts in client acquisition. I removed all of the complication, and I probably contracted just under $100,000 in new business in about 6 weeks.
Wow.
By matching, right? By making sure I was doing the right things for the problem I was trying to solve at the time.
That makes total sense. Okay, so we have growth.
So
what's the next stage after
the next one is leveraged.
Okay, so leverage.
Is when, right, you're out of hours in the day and days in the week, right? You can't do anything more with what it is that you have. We need to start leveraging your resources. I consider leveraged addition. We need to some addition here. So from a client acquisition standpoint, this is when we move from networking and maybe into speaking. Now we're getting out in front of a lot of people. Now, I'm still a big fan of as many active strategies as we can, backed up with passive strategies. But when we're trying to leverage our time, we need to get in front of groups of people. We're out of time to only do one-on-one. We get a lot more strategic. You might be in, for example, a highly curated referral group instead of a large networking group. Right? We're leveraging our time. We're being more strategic about it. We're now looking at addition, one to many.
Good.
Scaling,
yeah. Now I'm curious
different animal. Whole different animal. Scaling to me is when you're finally ready to incorporate passive strategies that run themselves. You put them together and then and you set them out free, right? You send them out into the wild, and they kind of function them. It's not set it and forget it. You have to do your A/B split testing. You have to do, right? You have to do all your testing and managing, but you're now running it instead of doing it.
Right. So give me some examples of that.
So these are your online funnels. These are your webinar funnels. These are your Google ad funnels. These are your consultation funnels. These are things that you are, again, it's not active, it's passive in nature. It feels active because it's so much work to make it happen. They're also the times when you're going for low cost, low ticket sales. So for a consultant, this is a perfect example in the coaching world, coaching and consulting. Growth is when you just need more one-on-one clients. Leverage is when you launch your group program. And scaling is when you have passive income off of products, right? And the reason it's a mistake to jump to scaling is most people, if you try to skip steps, you don't know enough about your message, you don't know enough about your audience, and you will run out of money before you're able to make it work. It's not that it can't work, but you're talking about beating your head against the wall instead of enjoying yourself.
Absolutely. I agree. And I mean, it totally resonates with me because that's the way I grew my business, right? So I completely agree. But I think it's also, there is kind of like, how you have different packages, like on a website, like on a software, and said, this is including this and this and this. And now the second one includes everything in the first one, but additional. And then the third one includes everything, but the additional. And I think that there should be also, and tell me if you agree with that, like the networking. It's very important. You do need the human in your life. Humans in your life, like you and I right now. We met. We're doing a podcast, so you can actually, instead of going to maybe like 10 networking events, that's what I was doing at the beginning of my career, networking events all the time.
Yeah.
You just have to be more specialized or economize on how many are you doing, and really look at those that really are a return for you. Maybe. It's also we talked about it before the show, in terms of the level of business is at, what was working before is not working now.
Right.
Now, as you said, more curated networking, or more events that are more specialized, that you can actually access your target market.
And right? I'll give you an example. So like you, I'm a huge fan of networking, especially in the beginning, because it's a great place also to test your messaging. Networking groups are a great place to test whether or not the way you speak about your business lands. Does anyone understand it? Or do they walk away giving you, oh, that's nice, and they don't. So you start out networking. Leverage. So last year, my number one way to network was via trading podcasts, right? So what was I doing with my time? By the time I would have a prep call, 20-minute prep call, then 20, 30 minutes. Then they would be on my show, and then I would be on their show. Now we're talking about, we've spent like 2.5 hours with each other over the course of a couple months. We've really gotten to know each other. And my podcast is an audience nurture strategy. Their podcast is an audience growth strategy. My podcast gets turned into articles and highlights and reels and all of those things, and a YouTube channel. So I'm leveraging, and I can assume if somebody is 100 episodes, etc., in on their podcast, they have their ducks in a row in some way. So I'm no longer having to filter at the networking event through all the people who aren't a good fit for me.
Right.
So I've now leveraged my time by doing all those things at once.
Right.
And then scaling is coming soon in my world, is when we're going to package somebody else. I will be paying somebody else. Like if you're already out of hours in the day and days in the week, scaling strategies take too much money and effort to put in a place. So somebody else will curate that content and turn it into membership sites and courses and all the amazing things that when we're ready, will all be available. And that's the difference. Those are the different stages.
Absolutely. Erin, it's definitely, you put it in it's excellent terms, because it's very simple, but it's correct. It's the right growth. And again, you can just do more, better. Doesn't mean more hours, but like
Right.
in a more, you just evolve yourself, and then you add more strategies and more strategies, and then
Right.
you get to the point where you're doing it all and you're doing it correctly, and that's where you can scale. So
And you're
agree.
running, right? You're running teams who are doing it. And your
Absolutely.
capacity grows. Like there's no way 5 years ago when I started this, if you were to tell me that I would be doing everything I'm doing now, I would have told you you're crazy. I didn't have the capacity yet.
Right.
Right. I didn't have, right. So your capacity, if this sounds overwhelming to you, don't worry. Your capacity grows.
Right. And what you mentioned that really resonated with me is that it has to be fun.
Oh,
Because
God.
right, exactly. You have to enjoy what you're doing. And it's very obvious that you enjoy what you're doing, and you have fun helping your clients. You have fun doing your podcast. You know, you just live life like that. It's just easier.
I get to talk to people all day long, which is my favorite. I get to learn about people all day long, which is another favorite. And the other thing, when you do things this way, because I was listening, I was overhearing a conversation. Oh, friends of mine who are unhappy at their job. And I thought about it. It's been almost 6 years since I've interacted with someone I didn't like. I mean, think about that for a second. What would your life be like if you could say that?
Right.
I don't interact with people I don't like. Like some conversation, you click bad or whatever, but it just doesn't happen in my world because of how my world, how I've created it.
That's amazing. Absolutely incredible.
It's fun.
Erin, it is. It's
fun that
fun.
way.
So,
It's
Erin,
no fun. It's no fun with people when you don't like them.
exactly. You're absolutely
That's
right.
not
You're in
fun.
control and you can decide. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Erin, if people want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
To make it really easy, everything is one place. So it's all at conqueryourbusiness.com. You can connect with me. You can grab my podcast. You can get to my social, is all at conqueryourbusiness.com.
Love it. Absolutely. Connect with Erin. She obviously knows what she's talking about, and she can definitely help with client acquisition, with acquisition strategies, with growing the business, and then leveraging and scaling. Love that. Erin, thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to have you on my podcast as well. We can talk systems that I'm so bad at.
Absolutely. We'll talk systems. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.